Hello everyone, my name's Craig Alvarez. Today I'm going to be giving a short presentation on the cortical lobes and their functions. You can see we have a diagram of the brain. We have the four main cortical lobes laid out here for you to see kind of their location, their relative size. You have the frontal lobe near the front of the brain, obviously, near your forehead and kind of the front top. The parietal lobe sits just behind that, between the frontal and occipital lobes, more on the top rear of the skull there. The occipital lobe on the very back of the brain, the smallest of the four lobes, and then the temporal lobe positioned on the side of your brain, just near your temple, below the other three. Each of these lobes is responsible for processing different types of information. Together they perform higher level processes, including things involving language, memory, learning, and decision making. We'll talk a little bit about each one, their functions, maybe a little bit about how they work together, and what an injury to these specific areas of the brain could result in. We'll start by talking about the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is responsible for a variety of different things. They include things having to do with reasoning, motor control, emotion, language, and conscious thought in general. There's three different areas of the frontal lobe we'll touch on that each sort of serve their own purpose within this variety of functions. The motor cortex is where we plan and coordinate our movement. If we decide we need to get up off the couch and walk to the bathroom, or maybe reach into the refrigerator for a beverage or something, this is where our brain puts those instructions together and coordinates when and how we're going to be executing this movement. Next, we have the prefrontal cortex. This is where higher level cognitive functioning happens, things like thinking and problem solving. Maybe you're learning difficult math problems, or things where you have to really be using logic and higher cognitive functioning in general to be understanding things. Finally, we have Broca's area, which is specific to language and speech production. This is where we take our ability to speak a language, our vocabulary, our understanding of words and their meaning, and they are put together as instructions, much like coordinating the movement is, but in terms of speech and communication and language. Obviously, damage to the frontal lobe could result in a variety of very serious things, as it's responsible for so much here. It can result in an inability to understand or express speech. This obviously relating to Broca's area. If that area were to become damaged, speech issues would be pretty inevitable. It could also result in weakness, paralysis, or loss of muscle control. Again, going back to the motor cortex, damage to this is going to hurt our ability to get up and walk around. It's going to hurt our ability to be able to reach for objects. This can also result in an emotional deficit, changes in behavior, or inappropriate behavior. If our ability to think critically and problem solve and just think logically and consider things in general, if that becomes inhibited, it can result in abnormal behavior, maybe uncontrollable behavior, things like that. Moving on to the parietal lobe here, we see a diagram that has a few substructures of the parietal lobe. We'll talk about one in particular. The parietal lobe processes information from the body's senses, primarily in an area called the somatosensory cortex, which is within the parietal lobe. This is where various sensations are understood, temperature, pain, touch in general, maybe how dense or soft something is. The parietal lobe also processes spatial information, understanding where our body is in relation to other objects or in a space in general. A lot of really important things the parietal lobe takes care of here. Damage to this could obviously be very serious, change the entire way that we interact with the world around us. If you think about the motor cortex is what allows us to reach out and grab that beverage, maybe a hot or cold beverage. It's the somatosensory cortex that's telling us whether it's hot or cold. Without that, you might experience a loss of sensation. You know, you might touch something that's really hot and be burned without taking your hand away. Damage to the parietal lobe could cause disorientation. Again, our inability to spatially process and understand where we are in relationship to other things would make something like crossing a street very dangerous. Maybe we don't know exactly how far away things are from us or where we are in relation to moving objects. Could also result in an inability to identify objects by touch, which is kind of an interesting one. If you weren't able to see something or have any other information about what it is, even having a memory of an object by sight, if you were to reach out and touch it with your eyes closed, you might not be able to identify what that is. So the parietal lobe, obviously a very important one here. Next, we have the temporal lobe. This is the one that sits on the side of your brain near your temple, below the other three lobes we're discussing here. Primarily responsible for things having to do with hearing, memory, emotion, and language. If you look at the bottom of this diagram, you'll see two areas of the temporal lobe that they've pointed out. The first being the auditory cortex. This is where our basic hearing is processed. This is where we might understand something to be a high-pitched or a low-pitched sound. We might experience harmony between sounds. Maybe we're listening to music and we're noticing how the sounds relate to one another and how they overlap and contrast or harmonize. Also the timing of auditory stimulation, whether maybe a consistent beat, maybe something that's happening quickly or slowly, maybe it's consistent or sporadic. This is where all that basic information having to do with auditory stimulation is processed. Then you see to the right of that is Wernicke's area, and this is where the higher level processing of those sounds and their characteristics happens. So when we're listening to someone speak, we're not just hearing the pitch and the timing and the harmony and the general characteristics of the speech. We're comprehending this as language with our vocabulary and our memory and the things that we know. So it takes the basic characteristics of the speech and combines it with all of those things so that we're comprehending it. This is where we understand language and we link our previously learned sounds to what we're experiencing now. Maybe we recognize a sound as something that's threatening or something that's inviting, something that's enjoyable or something that's not. Wernicke's area is what's putting all that together for us. Damage to these areas can result obviously in hearing problems. It can result in language impairments. It's going to hurt our ability to put our speech together. It's going to hurt our ability to understand what people are speaking to us. It can result in some pretty serious disorders, including epilepsy, dyslexia, and Alzheimer's disease. Finally, we have the occipital lobe, the smallest of the four lobes, but a very important one. It sits at the very sort of rear bottom of the brain here. The occipital lobe contains our primary visual cortex, which interprets all visual information. This can help us recognize and differentiate between colors and patterns. It can help us recognize the form of something. Maybe you see the silhouette of something or something out of the corner of your eye or something that's obscured, but you can still sort of recognize its form and see it for what it is. It also has to do with motion. This is where our visual of how fast something is moving, maybe how slow something's moving, the direction that it's going, all of that is processed. This ties in with our depth perception, how far away something is, where we are in relation to it. If an object is in motion, is it going toward us? Is it going away from us? All very important things as we wander around through life. And also facial recognition being a very big one. Without the visual cortex, we would not recognize our friends and family members. We would have a hard time bonding with people. We would have a hard time telling the difference between who we trust and who we don't, and who is a part of our lives and who is not. Damage to this lobe could result in some very serious things. Color blindness, hallucinations, or even total blindness. And it can also severely limit our ability to sort of map the world around us. You know, we all become very familiar with our neighborhoods and our cities and our towns and the school that we go to and our job, and we have this great memory of the spaces that we frequent. And without the occipital lobe and our visual cortex, we wouldn't be able to store that map in our mind, and we could easily get lost on our way to work. And that concludes my presentation on the 4 cortical lobes and their functions. I hope you found it to be enjoyable and informative. Good luck to you all in the future. I hope you enjoyed the class as much as I did. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.